And hello, everybody. We'll be looking today at some changes that occurred in industrialization as England becomes a more industrialized nation. Yesterday, we introduced the topic. This is mostly on the effect of agriculture. So we're going to talk about how technology impacts agriculture and industry today. And this screencast should be about 15 minutes. So basically, industrialization is the idea that a machine does work using fuel, fossil fuel, rather than a living thing which uses food as its energy to do the same task. And we use this term horsepower, which basically means how many horses would be required to do the same task. So if you have an engine that has 50 horsepower, it means it does the work of 50 horses. A big invention was the steam engine. The steam engine absolutely revolutionized the way people did work in farms and in factories. It starts in the 1760s through the 1770s with James Watt, who is basically the person who was doing a lot of the work with the steam engine. The steam engine changed agriculture and the rest of the economy, but one of the effects it has that less people were needed to work on farms because some of the tasks that were done on farms now were starting to be done by machines, which means that people started leaving the farms for a couple of reasons. You had the beginning of factories in cities. And this leads to what's called urbanization, people moving into urban or city areas because of new jobs. So Watts is selling his machines around the 1770s, and they're being used in mines, they're being used in breweries and mills, and the first basic starting of factories. Steamships are the next invention, and this is an American ideal. They start in England, but they're really developed heavily in the United States at this time, and they're used heavily. The steamboat becomes a real powerhouse to move goods from parts of the country using rivers, and rivers that go east to west expand the frontier, and rivers that go north to south expand movement to new areas. So the rivers become major highways because of the steamboat in the United States and open up the frontier. Railways become built in the 1820s, that era, using the steam engine and coal as its fuel. And of course, this leads for the easier transport of goods and rapid movement of people. You have to remember, most people didn't have a horse, but they could go on a train, and they could go to various parts of the country, and goods could be brought in much larger capacity, because think of how big a rail car is and a cargo hold in a railroad car rather than a cart and horse. So you have, or wagon trains, much more efficient. So you start having goods and people being able to move rapidly. By the 1860s, the United States and England are covered in trains, and we're miles ahead of everybody else, but they're developing in other places. One of the outcomes of steam being used is that you need a large water supply, which is why most factories are founded near rivers. And an unexpected outcome is that water pollution becomes a major factor in some of these areas, and still to this day in some areas around that are heavily urbanized, water pollution can be a real issue. Steel is invented by taking out certain elements out of pig iron. Pig iron is a very weak form of iron. And you take out what's called coke from it, and if you take out coke and combine it with other materials, you have an alloy called steel. And steel allows for buildings and other types of girders to have more support. And basically, it's steel that leads to modern types of buildings, especially multi-story buildings. So a building can use the steel as a support system in the walls to allow structures to go up. And this leads to the rise of large, huge buildings in New York and other cities. So steel is a big, big invention, and this also happens in the 19th century. In the late 18th century, the cotton gin is invented by Eli Whitney, who's from Connecticut, and ironically, it should be Whitney, not Whitten. And he's an American. He's also an abolitionist, and it's going to have an interesting side effect. One effect is it makes cotton a huge cash crop in the United States. Cotton had not been very important because it was so much work to get the seeds out of the fiber so it could be useful. Now that happened very quickly with the machine that basically got all the seeds out right away, and you could have pure cotton. So you have the textile industries born in England and then the United States, and cotton is being exported. The United States, mostly the southern United States, is selling cotton to all over the world. So this leads to a much great improvement in the industry and in the trade of the United States, but it also um, hugely impacts the slave industry. Slavery was really dying out, actually, even in the southern colonies. It just wasn't profitable anymore. And for moral reasons, people didn't like it either. But wrongly, people would put some people always tend to put profits over other people. So slavery becomes profitable, and more slaves start coming. The amount of slaves coming into the United States in the early part of the 19th century, as the cotton gin is being used, explodes, and thousands and thousands of slaves are being exported to the United States and other parts of the Americas that grow cotton, because as an indirect consequence of the cotton gin. There was a lot of ugliness in living in these cities. There was pollution. A lot of people looked for jobs. There were more people looking for jobs than these early factories and industries could support, so there was a lot of poverty. The cities became quickly overcrowded with many issues such as lack of housing, sickness, lack of food, and overwhelming poverty. It got very ugly, and people started looking at industrialism and cities as being ugly places. And you had the birth of Romanticism. Romanticism tended to focus on the beauty of nature, harmony, and imagination, and it took its form in art, literature, and music. The traits of Romanticism basically included, excuse me, I had to go back there. It took a deep admiration of nature. It wanted a simpler life, and it's seeing that nature is far greater than humans and its machines. Nature is the boss. It attached deep emotions and vivid sensory details in its writing and in its art, and even in a sense in its music. It was meant to create pictures in your mind. The subjects were ordinary working people, common people who just lived a simple, quiet life. And it stressed the individual over the state or the community. Now, why? Because the back to the way it was is leaving the way it is, with people massing together in cities. And it's like saying, I reject this ugliness. I don't like the negative effects of this urbanization. I'm going back. And I'll stand alone. I'll stand in a small group. And so the individual becomes very important. Now, there are other things that are in your textbook, but these are the highlights that you need to do. And this will help you on your worksheets that you have to do within this unit on the agricultural revolution and how industry affected it. So this was a bit short, but I think it gave you some insights, and you should be able to use this not only in the unit activity, but in your test. Have a great day.